Stories making headlines this hour. President Park Geun-hye and her Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin agreed to increase trade and strengthen cooperation in energy, transportation, and science in their Seoul summit. The vice defense ministers of South Korea and Japan discussed bilateral security cooperation amid high tensions between the two countries over territorial and historical issues. Plus, as survivors grow increasingly desperate for food and medical supplies in the typhoon-devastated Philippines, the president of the island nation says the death toll is likely closer to 2,500, far short of the well-publicized estimate of 10,000. But these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Wednesday, November 13th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin with the Korea-Russia summit that took place earlier in the day between President Park Geun-hye and visiting Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The two sat down for talks on ways to expand bilateral cooperation, namely through rail and port development projects. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju has this report.
The summit agenda this time around was focused on economic cooperation. The two leaders agreed to support Seoul's participation in a joint railway project between North Korea and Russia. The 54-kilometer-long railway would run between Russia's eastern border town of Hasan and the North Korean port city of Rajin. A Korean consortium comprised of KORAIL, POSCO, and Hyundai Merchant Marine plans to invest around 210 billion won, or $196 million, in the project. Whether Korean companies will actually take part in this project has yet to be decided, but if they do participate, it will represent an opportunity to initiate three-way projects with North Korea and Russia, laying the foundation for Pyongyang to eventually open up. The two nations also decided to set up joint funds for $3 billion to financially support Korean and Russian companies.
우리 두 정상은 러시아 극동 시베리아 지역 개발에 대한 양국 기업들의 참여를 촉진할 공동 투융자 플랫폼의 구축을 환영하며 이를 통해 투자 활성화가 이루어질 것이라 기대합니다.
Pundits say the agreements allow President Park to take the first step towards her so-called Eurasia Initiative, which aims to create a massive single market in Eurasia, combined with Russia's new policy push focused on East Asia. Other MOUs were signed for new cooperative projects in the sectors of shipbuilding and North Pole route development. The two nations also signed a visa waiver agreement for visitors planning to stay in the other's country for 60 days or less. When it came to North Korea, the Russian president threw full support behind President Park's trust-building process with the North, describing it as crucial in normalizing inter-Korean relations and maintaining stability in the region. The importance of a quick resumption of the six-party denuclearization talks was also highlighted.
Russia and Korea have a common goal of securing peace and safety on the peninsula and equally in other countries. This can only be achieved in the framework of the six-party dialogue.
The two sides, however, reaffirmed that they would not tolerate Pyongyang's nuclear development and urged the communist state to abide by its international obligations and previous pledges. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
For more on what we can read into Putin's visit to Korea, we turn to Kim Tae-hwan, the director of the Korea Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Right. Well, today was the second summit between the two leaders, following the one-on-one back in September during the G20 summit in Russia. Now, what do you think is the diplomatic objective of Russia from today's Putin visit?
Well, I think it's Russia has very urgent diplomatic objective, which is related to domestic situation. We all know that since the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the Russia Federation has been heavily reliant for its national economy on natural resources, crude oil, and natural gas. But we all know that, the prices of natural resources, including natural gas and crude oil, are volatile in international markets, and for the past two decades, Russia actually had learned bitter experiences from that. So they do recognize the importance of fundamentally restructuring their national economy, and they call it as the modernization of Russia's economy, and which needs actually two things. The first one is the development of Eastern Siberia and Russia's Far East. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that, no less important and directly linked to the first objective, is to as tightly as possible, integrate the Russian economy with the rapidly rising Asian economy. And in that sense, the particular projects, say, for example, I would argue that one of the crucial points of the summit meeting this time is the project linking Hassan, the Russian city, and Najin, the North Korean port city, by railroads, although it's only like a 54-kilometer long. Actually, Najin Hassan project is not simply 54-kilometer long railroad, but also it includes the development of a Najin port, as well as establishment of very complex logistics and distribution system around the Najin port. Okay, that I think is very is sort of like a strategic linchpin for Korean for the part of Korea. It is simply I would argue window toward the Eurasian continent. So that project is I would again argue that it's a gist of this summit conference this time.
Well, earlier this week, Putin seemed to link unification and the six-party talks. We mainly have talked about the six-party talks in terms of denuclearization. Is there anything significant that we can read into Putin's statement?
Well, absolutely, frankly speaking, I personally am not surprised. The declaration itself, the statement itself is not surprising. But this time, that I believe that there's one big difference, which is the substance. The declaration, Russia's support of the Korean peaceful reunification of Korea and denuclearization on the Korean peninsula, would be this time be like supported, consolidated, possibly consolidated by their real economic commitment.
Well, we're well past the Cold War era of international politics, but in this new day and age, what should the Korean government do to enhance relations with Russia?
Simply put, demand-side approach. What really Russians want from us, what they expect from us, that's precisely what I mean, demand-side approach. And this summit conference, I believe it's the environment is perfectly set. Why? Because we do know now, this time, how Russia eagerly need us in their endeavor to resuscitate the entire national economy. So we have to, in the coming years, I mean, decade, 2 decades, I don't care, but then we have to pay our keen attention to what they really demand, what they really want, what they really expect from Korea.
Right, Mr. Kim, Director of Korea Foundation, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
South Korea's top nuclear envoy Cho Tae-yong met with his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei in Beijing on Wednesday to discuss the North Korean nuclear issue.
Cho said that Seoul and Beijing have been in close consultation on Pyongyang's nuclear program and expressed hopes for a productive discussion with his Chinese partner this time around. The two sides were largely expected to have exchanged views on the conditions required for resuming the stalled six-party denuclearization talks. The meeting follows Cho's recent visit to Washington and Woo's to Pyongyang, and the two diplomats were expected to brief each other on the details of their respective trips. Meanwhile, the two Koreas met for working-level talks on Wednesday to discuss how to better manage their jointly run factory zone in the north.
The talks, the first of their kind in nearly 2 months, involved 2 separate meetings, one on protecting South Korean investments in the Kaesong Industrial Complex and the other on globalizing the joint business park, where ways to attract overseas investment topped the agenda. However, the 2 sides failed to set a date for a roadshow for foreign investors that was originally scheduled for last month. Additional talks will be held on Thursday, where issues related to the legal rights of South Korean workers at the complex will be discussed. Now, wrapping up the 2013 Seoul Defense Dialogue, the high-ranking defense chiefs of Korea and Japan held a one-on-one on Wednesday.
Korean Vice Defense Minister Baek Seung-ju used the chance to express deep concerns over Japan's push for collective self-defense. Our Han Da-eun has more.
Korean Vice Defense Minister Baek Seung-ju says Japan should not trigger regional insecurity by pushing for its collective self-defense, and that Korea will not tolerate factors that could negatively affect national security and its interests. His remarks came during a bilateral meeting with Japan's Administrative Vice Minister of Defense Masanori Nishi on Wednesday. Responding to Nishi's explanation about Japan's plans to establish a U.S.-style National Security Council and to reinterpret its self-defense ban, Baek reiterated that Japan should uphold the spirit of its peace constitution in order to contribute to regional security and reflect on history to ease the rising concerns of neighboring countries. Baek went on to say that Japan should now focus on regaining the trust of its regional neighbors above anything else. As for the pending issue of signing a treaty and exchanging confidential military information, Vice Minister Nishi urged for prompt action, citing North Korea's nuclear threats, while Baek stated there should first be public consensus on the matter. The first bilateral vice defense ministers meeting in 2 years came on the last day of the 2013 Seoul Defense Dialogue, which brought together top officials and experts from 21 nations across the Asia-Pacific region. And then, Arirang News.
In domestic news, the prosecutor's office, dealing with the aftermath of 2 separate scandals, is seeking a fresh start with a new chief.
The President Park Geun-hye's pick to take the job appeared before lawmakers for a confirmation hearing on this Wednesday, answering questions about how he would right the ship. Our Kim Hyun-ji reports on the latest.
Prosecutor General nominee Kim Jin-tae told lawmakers Wednesday that he will thoroughly reform the prosecution and win back the people's trust, if confirmed.
I will work to bring about a change of thought. I will conduct a study into how prosecutors should bear themselves as public servants, go about investigating crimes, and work efficiently, and win the people's trust. Then, I will share the findings with all prosecutors and make sure they follow them.
Kim, the former deputy chief of the Supreme Prosecutor's Office, would be walking into his new job at a time of crisis. His predecessor, Choi Dong-wook, resigned in September amid allegations that he fathered a child out of wedlock. Opposition lawmakers allege that the presidential office pulled strings to push Choi out of office because it was displeased with the way he handled an investigation into the spy agency's alleged meddling in last year's presidential election. Internal divisions within the prosecution were then made public last month in a televised dispute between Yoon Sung-yeol, the lead prosecutor who spearheaded a probe into the spy agency scandal, and his superior, Cho Young-gon. Yoon claimed that his probe into the spy agency was undermined by external pressure, while Cho said that Yoon had failed to follow proper procedure in his handling of the case. What does the Prosecutor General nominee think about the divisions?
I think the prosecution has exposed something it shouldn't have. If confirmed, I will tighten discipline and make sure the prosecution doesn't disappoint the public.
The nominee also vowed to establish the political neutrality within the prosecution and conduct all its investigations fairly. Ruling party lawmakers asked the Prosecutor General nominee where he stands on launching a special probe into allegations that the spy agency and military meddled in the December presidential election. The nominee said that's a matter to be determined by the National Assembly and that he would follow its decision. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
before your day ends and another begins. Get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features restrictions is on the rise.
Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report.
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on the news are trying to cover up the South's true intentions in maintaining confrontation.
Some mixed signals for the local job market as the number of new job openings in Korea rose for the 5th consecutive month in October, while unemployment rose among young job seekers. Statistics Korea says that new jobs were created largely among the 50 and over age group, which brought the total number of employed to 26 million last month. That's up nearly 2% from a year earlier and is the biggest jump in 13 months. The employment rate, however, stood at 60.5% in October, well below the 70% target set by the Park administration. The unemployment rate for young job seekers, those between 15 to 29, rose by nearly 1 percentage point to 7.8%, in stark contrast to the overall unemployment rate of 2.8%. And speaking of employment, in two separate announcements on Wednesday, the government and the nation's largest conglomerate put forth plans to create flexible part-time jobs. The Labor Ministry said it will hire more than 15,000 public officials as part-time workers by 2017, and that the application process will begin before the year ends. Samsung Group, meanwhile, announced that it will employ a total of 6,000 people as part-timers at its affiliates in some 120 different job fields by this coming January. They will specifically be targeting the employment of women who left their jobs to start families and middle-aged people who are having difficulties finding work.
And turning now to the aftermath of Super Typhoon Haiyan, the relief momentum has been building up in the Philippines over the past few days, despite damage to transport links and appalling weather conditions. International aid has finally started to reach some of the hardest hit areas where people are desperate for food, clean water, and shelter. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Nearly 5 days have passed since Typhoon Haiyan swept across the central Philippines, but relief efforts are proving slow. Aid workers say supplies have arrived in the country, but delivering it to the hardest hit areas is difficult as many roads remain clogged with debris. Under the heaps of rubble, the strong odor of decomposing corpses hangs in the air, exposing survivors to possible health risks.
It's really difficult. The rescuers have not yet come back, even if they said they would be after 3 days. Why have they not recovered the bodies here? It's reeking bad.
Several countries and international aid organizations have pledged assistance to the Philippines. Among them, the United States and Britain have dispatched warships to the area. The U.S. is sending its aircraft carrier USS George Washington, and Britain has deployed its Royal Navy destroyer HMS Daring from Singapore. As efforts continue, the Philippine president has suggested that the actual death toll is lower than previously thought. In an interview with CNN, Benigno Aquino said the number of dead could be a quarter of the 10,000 initially reported, stressing the initial estimate made by a local official arose from the emotional trauma rather than an actual body count. The UN says more than 11 million people have been affected by Typhoon Haiyan, and some 673,000 people have been displaced. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And here's a quick update on the missing Koreans in the Philippines. Korea's foreign ministry said that out of the 55 Koreans that were thought to have in the worst affected areas in the nation, 32 of them have been confirmed alive, but 23 of them are still unaccounted for. Back here in the nation, Asan Medical Center, the largest hospital in Korea, has finished upgrading its International Healthcare Center facility in order to serve a growing number of foreign patients and provide better quality services. Kim Young-gil has more.
The International Healthcare Center at Asan Medical Center celebrated its expansion with a ceremony on Wednesday. The facility opened its doors in 1989 to meet the needs of a growing population of expatriates, business people, and tourists. Today, the international clinic has 4 patient rooms, larger waiting rooms, and more staff to provide patients with better medical care. The center specializes in treatments for cancer and heart disease, as well as organ transplantation.
Asan Medical Center has decided to expand our International Healthcare Center facilities to provide more quality care to foreign patients from many countries and make them feel at home.
The director of Yonsei Severance Hospital in Seoul was at the opening ceremony to wish the director well and gave recommendations on how to better manage the international clinic.
The first is a good attitude. You must treat people like you want to help them. The second is skill in handling people. And the third is the knowledge to cure their disease.
The doctors at Asan's international clinic are often able to provide treatment within 48 hours, thanks to a system that allows them direct access to specialists in various fields. With the expansion of the International Healthcare Center, Asan Medical Center is hoping to meet the growing demand for healthcare that's up to global standards by helping international patients take full advantage of Asan's service. 김영길, Arirang News.
The Lotte Giants and their star slugger Kang Min-ho have reached a record contract deal.
And Stephen Che joins us in the Sports Center to give us the details. Stephen, how much money are we talking about here?
Hey guys, the Lotte Giants and their catcher agreed on a 4-year, 7.5 billion won or nearly $7 million deal, which will keep Kang on the only team he's ever played for. The record-setting deal is straight up and down regarding its terms. Kang will get a nearly $3 million signing bonus and about $1 million in salary per year with no options, making him the highest paid player in the KBO. And it doesn't come as a surprise to many, as the Lotte Giants had previously said they would hand over a record-breaking contract to the slugger. Let's now get to the evening's top matches, starting with V-League action. The Korean Air Jumbos hosted the LIG Insurance Graders in Incheon. The Jumbos were looking for 3 in a row, and it looked like it was going to happen as the first set fell in their favor, 25-22. Michael Sanchez lifted the Jumbos with his vicious spikes, ending with a match-high 26 points. Now LIG Insurance can't stop the onslaught, and Korean Air wins with ease, 3-0. Now let's finish with Wednesday's top KBL matchup. The Dongbu Promi hosted the Mobis Phoebus in Wonju. Kim Ju-sung was out of Dongbu's lineup with an injury, but both teams start with buckets. It's 19-18 at the end of the first. Then in the second, Mobis catches a break as Moon Tae-young lights it up on both ends of the floor. They're up 36-31 at the half. Now they put their collective foot on the gas and don't look back. Moon goes for 18 points, 6 boards, and 7 assists. Ham Ji-hoon gets a double-double, and Mobis wins 73-56. And meanwhile, the LG Sakers beat Anyang KGC for their 4th straight win, 72-62. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Today was a cold day with clear skies here in Korea, but I hear that tomorrow is shaping up to be a rainy one.
That's right. For details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, hello.
Hey guys, as Sean mentioned, light showers are forecast to sprinkle throughout the country tomorrow. Now taking a look at the satellite map, today we had clear skies throughout the country due to a high pressure system from the West Sea. Tomorrow, light showers with about 5 millimeters of total precipitation is forecast nationwide, first starting in the west coast regions in the afternoon before spreading to the central regions later at night. So make sure to have a small umbrella with you. This round of showers won't lead to a drop in temperature, so no worries of a colder weather for a while. Taking a closer look at tomorrow's numbers, rainy Seoul peaks at 9 degrees while Daegu and Gwangju reach 13. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon tops out at 10 degrees, meanwhile Dokdo and Mount Kumgang hits 13 and 0 degrees respectively. Well, that's all I have for you this hour, but don't forget to join me for another update after midnight.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's our broadcast on this Wednesday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hae in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.
Game together. Dream forever. Global Game Exhibition G-Star 2013. Global Game Exhibition G-Star 2013. Bexco Busan, November 14th to 17th. New game releases, smart games, board games and other cultural events for the entire family. A new chapter in the history of games, G-Star. Check out G-Star Conference and other events in the program. G-Star 2013, Global Game Exhibition.
Hi, my name